start recording. You guys can share your screen or do whatever you need to do. I will turn off my mic and my video and sit in the background and monitor the chat room and mute everybody as needed. But right now, you two sirs are in control.
Thanks, Kristen. Right. Hey, so I'll give a quick intro. Most folks might maybe know Neil, maybe don't know Neil. But I'm Willis Colpitz, the Director of Training here for the auto physical damage side here at Mitchell. Super excited that Collision Hub has invited us once again to do a presentation. We're going to kind of go over diagnostics. I know it says Mitchell Diagnostics, but we really want to focus on what do you do with what you find out, right? I think most of us clearly understand how to plug into an ODB port and do a scan, but what do you do with the information that comes out of there, and how do you fix cars, make sure they're fixed correctly, and do that kind of stuff. So that teased up a little bit. I got a slide at the end that I want to show everybody. I think it's super exciting stuff that Mitchell's been working on. But I want to turn it over to Neil Hoffman. Neil's our diagnostic specialist here at Mitchell, the ASE certified guy, been around forever scanning cars, and we're super happy to have him on our team. And he's going to kind of guide us through this today. So Neil, it's all you, buddy.
All right, thanks, Willis. Thanks everyone for showing up. Yeah, I have my Mitchell Diagnostics slide up there, but this is going to be just really in general. Some of the topics that we want to go over today is, number one, when do we perform, the pre-scan, how to provide proper battery support when we're performing scans or calibrations, how to research fault codes, using a scan tool to reset or calibrate or initialize different sensors, when you should be performing your post-scan, and what to do when codes don't clear, importance of documenting these scans. And then we'll get in a little bit of a dynamic calibration on there too. So I'll start with this. So really, anytime we run a scan, we want to make sure that, sorry, get my PowerPoint. My PowerPoint is actually back up here. I'm going to get live into my tool in a second here, but just in case. We'll start with, just the pre and post scan. Most of you are probably aware, almost all the manufacturers put out some sort of position statement on scanning, pre and or post, whether it's recommended or required. I just have an example of a Honda one up here. If it's not in an actual position statement, it's probably because they put it in their repair standards. So it's not that the other manufacturer haven't put out a position statement say that you're not supposed to scan. They just figure it's redundant because they already have in their repair procedures of when they're supposed to do these scans. So there's lots of different sources you can get these position statements that either for your own research, you need to provide them with the repair, documenting why you're performing the different scans. So like I said, this is just Honda one. Now, Honda's very wide open with theirs. They really, anything above 1996, they want you to do a post and a pre-repair scan on it. Anything basically with an OBD2 port. Other manufacturers might be a little bit more specific on what years they want to do it with. And as mentioned, when you are performing these scans, battery voltage is really key. I'm not trying to support any specific brand. I just kind of wanted to pull up what one of these battery support systems look like. That, having proper battery voltage is key to do a proper scan. Number one, a lot, especially with the vehicles with these push button start ignition systems, that ignition may turn off before you even run your scan or while you're doing your scan, because a lot of them have some sort of intelligent battery monitor built into them that if the battery starts dropping down a certain voltage, it'll start turning modules off or maybe even turn the ignition off completely. So having a proper battery voltage is really key on running scans, and even more key when you get into running calibrations. So you should have something at your shop to provide good battery voltage while you're running these scans. Most of these scans only take a few moments, so it's not that big of a deal. But when you start getting calibrations, diagnostics, you're going to have the ignition on for a much longer period of time, and that's where the battery voltage starts dropping down. And even if it doesn't shut off a module, it might start creating fault codes, and it just creates more headaches, more diagnostics for you. I'm actually going to jump out of this, and now we're going to jump into my tool here. And also, when we want to perform the scans, I recommend before you do any repairs in the vehicle, as soon as that car comes in, before you take a single component off, you want to run a scan. You need to know what's in that vehicle before you start any work, right? You're going to start creating fault codes when things get disassembled. So you want to be able to log that before that happens. Not only is it going to be able to log those scans, is those scans are going to have somewhat of a history data on them too, right? You'll know if it's a current fault code, a pending fault code, or a history fault code. And it's going to also help you determine whether or not it's related to that claim and that repair that you're doing. So having a date and time stamp scan report can be really beneficial to the shop. As soon as that car comes in, you start your repairs. So some of you might already be familiar with the Mitchell Diagnostics scan tool, just at least in scanning in general. So this is the screen of my tool right here. I am logged into remotely. I'm kind of talking earlier. I do have a backup on this, but I'm logged in remotely via TeamViewer, and hopefully that is going to work with me today. So once we have the ignition on, we're plugged into the OBD2 port. We're going to select the vehicle. Now, most modern scan tools also have this option, but we want to make, most time we're going to be using auto ID. And that's where the scan tool is going to pull the VIN number from the vehicle's ECU. It's going to identify the year, make, and model of that vehicle. This mandate, I believe, started in about 2008. So there will be some older vehicles where you'll have to use a manual selection. It'll be kind of hit and miss before then because it wasn't mandated. But most time, most modern vehicles, you're going to be using auto ID. So our tool is going to pull that VIN number. It's identified the year, make, and model. At this stage, I might need to pick trim package. Now, the nice thing about this is really just for our scan report. It's not going to affect how the tool scans the vehicle. So if you accidentally pick the wrong trim package, it's not going to miss modules, right? So if you pick like a base model and it's actually a fully loaded module, it's not going to affect how it scans. It just changes what's printed up on the scan report. So you'll pick the appropriate trim package. All right, so now I get into my main menu. If I want to perform my pre or post scan, our user interface here shows us where I'm going to click on the top left button and read DTC's all systems. Now, when I tap on that, I have this feature turned on our tool. I find it pretty handy to do this now. It does give you the option to add a little bit more details to this report before you run the scan. You put a repair order number on there, put the vehicle odometer reading, which makes the most sense now. You're in front of the vehicle, the ignition is on. If you want to, log any technicians that are doing this, and I can also mark this as a pre or post scan. Nice thing with our integration with our software, I can actually leave all this blank. Simply hit continue and move on because I can put that data in later on too. So we're going to start going through all the modules. Now it depends on the year of the vehicle, whether it's a CAN network or not. It's either going to go through those modules one by one as possibly being in there, or it'll tap into that CAN network, establish which modules are installed in the vehicle, and scan those modules from there. We got most of our scans down to about a minute nowadays. So as soon as it's done, it's now generating a PDF report, gathers up the information, and as long as you're within a Wi-Fi connection, it's going to automatically upload that report for you. So you'll have this sitting in your email inbox. It'll be sitting in your Mitchell Connect account. So I don't have to save or send or walk the tool in and plug it into a printer or download any files. It just automatically uploads for me. Now I can view my fault codes that I did found a couple different ways. Either right here on this screen, I can tap on the individual modules and it's going to show me which fault codes are in there. Or if I want to see the complete report in the tool, simply click on the green arrow for view report, and this will list all the modules out here. Pretty standardized setup here. Darker gray lines and bold is going to be the module. Then underneath we'll have some fault codes and descriptions listed in those modules.
Hey, Neil.
Yeah.
Just real quick, because something came across the chatter real quick. I replied to it, but I just give you an opportunity to talk to it real quick. And the question was, we had an issue with some cars, the airbags and seat belts are out, and we don't have the crash event record, okay? I replied to that with, of course, most OEs don't report the crash event data, i.e., when it happened, miles per hour, stuff like that in the diagnostics. But could you expand on that for me?
Sure. Yeah, I actually looked up a little bit of information on that recently, trying to find out, where can you find that data? Because, of course, if we can get it, we want to be able to get it. And from my research, basically found that there are specialized tools for this, crash data retrieval tools, that can pull that information. The only problem with that is not all vehicles even log it. So even if you bought the specialized equipment just for that purpose, it doesn't mean you're going to get that data. Last I read, the report that with the rules and regulations on that is that the governing bodies are not mandating manufacturers log that information because enough of them are kind of doing it on their own, which last I saw was about 70% of vehicles at most will have that available. The only thing they mandate is that it uses the same language. So that way you can buy one specific crash data retrieval tool to get that. Because in the past, you had to buy different data retrieval tools for different manufacturers. So to put a point on that, no, we do not pull that crash data retrieval information up on here. There is specialized equipment for that.
Perfect. Thanks, Neil.
Yep. So I have a couple different ways I can research these fault codes while I can do it right here while I'm in the tool. If I tap on individual fault codes, it does bring me to a browser where we have some links. So some of our customers may have subscriptions to Mitchell One or All Data. I'd be able to click on those over here on the right, and you'll be able to log into your accounts. We have our own database that we can look research upon that's actually in Connect, so I wouldn't be doing that in the tool. And we have some integration with that, which I'll go over. And then, we always have the Google link on here. Not always my first choice, but I was a technician for almost 25 years. I belong to many professional subscriptions, right? Some specialized, some generic ones. They didn't always have the information I needed. So Google has saved my butt a couple times over the year, so I won't discount it, but it's going to be hit and miss. The nice thing is, say you click on that Google link, it's actually going to fill the search form out for you. So like on this one, it's going to say 2008 Ford F-150, fault code B1202. And then, with the gamble of Google, maybe get some great hits, or maybe find a whole bunch of 2008 Ford F-150s for sale, right? So I won't make any promises on your search results, but just one of those tools that, does come in handy. We put that right here in the tool, quick link on the actual fault codes. I want to go back to my scan report, maybe do some more research on other fault codes. Simply hit the back button, it's going to bring me back to this report. Now, if I don't need to do any more research on these fault codes, I want to clear these fault codes, whether an attempt to see which ones are going to clear, which ones I need to chase down, or if I'm performing my post-scan, I want to clear the fault codes out. Simply just go to the top row of my tool here. We have the clear button or the engine icon. Now, our software does give you a few different options. One we always recommend using is the clear and reread on the left. Our tool does exactly that. It's going to clear the modules out. It's going to go back and it's going to rerun the scan on that vehicle. And that ensures you that that fault code actually cleared out. And that way, if you do have a hard fault, something that wasn't repaired, something that was left disconnected, maybe a component was replaced, say, some sort of sensor that needs some sort of calibration. Those fault codes generally will not clear out until that initialization or calibration is done. So by doing that reread, it's either going to let you be aware that there's still something you need to work on, or it's going to be that insurance lets you know that, yep, that fault code did clear out and that vehicle is going to be ready for a test drive, which actually brings up another point of when to perform the post-scan. So obviously when the repairs are done, you want to do your first post-scan, right? You want to make sure that all your work is done, all your faults have been cleared, all the necessary components have been replaced. Now, if you do clear all those fault codes out and you have a clean report, now it's time for a test drive, right? You're going to have static fault codes that will clear out no problem. But as soon as you take it for a test drive, that system gets activated, that component gets turned on, goes through a drive cycle. Those fault codes could come back. But I always recommend post-scan when the vehicle repairs are done before your test drive, and another post-scan as soon as the test drive is done to make sure that after the drive cycle was performed, nothing recurred. And let you know you need to go back and further in there. Because a lot of these systems need quite the drive cycle, right? Whether it's some sort of ADAS equipment, even just simple sensors in the engine bay might need multiple drive cycles, or at least a complete drive cycle for it to generate and confirm a fault code. So I always recommend post-scan before and after a test drive. So there's pre and post on the tool. And actually before, I'm going to jump over to my Mitchell Connect account. And this is where I can view the report that actually got sent to me. It's a little bit more elaborate than what we see on the tool. Before I do that, is there any questions on running that pre and post scan, when and where? All right.
Haven't seen anything on the chatter, Neil, so we must have explained it pretty well. Thank you.
All right. So now I'm going to jump into my Mitchell Connect. This is where all my scan reports get sent to. Now they also get sent to my email inbox, so we got a little bit of redundancy built in there. And you can turn that off if you want. Now I like our Mitchell Connect interface because they're all in one place. So when I sign in there, oh, and here's that internet. I should have taken some screenshots of this too. All right, let's see. I already have one I have pulled up on here. So I'm going to jump to this one. So let's go over one of these scan reports. So this is what a report looks like when it gets sent to you in the PDF format. Now this one I did designate as a post scan. If I had not done this before I ran my scan, I can do it now. So over here on the right, I have the option to check the boxes pre or post scan, or not applicable. It'll just show up a scan report. And wherever I save that at, it'll change my header as that. We'll have our our date and time stamp when that scan was performed, year, make, and model of the vehicles on here, and our trim package. So this is where if you'd accidentally picked the wrong trim package, this is where it would show up. So it doesn't change the report, but obviously, you want to be in conjunction with your report and your RO. So we do want to make sure we pick the right trim package. Our VIN number will auto-populate at the top of the report. If it uses the auto ID function, you'll get the little green check mark verified next. So that just means the tool pulled it for me. I didn't manually enter it in there. And if I wanted to fill out the RO field, comment, or mileage, I can put that all in here if I had not done that ahead of time. And that will all print up here underneath the year, make, and model. So then we'll break down the system summary with ours. So on this vehicle, it shows us 35 total controllers scanned. It doesn't necessarily mean this vehicle had 35 controllers, just based on that VIN number, based on the year, make, and model, there was a possibility of 35 controllers. So that's how many we looked for as possibly installed. It'll show how many of those controllers actually had diagnostic trouble codes in it, how many controllers had no diagnostic trouble codes in it, and then we'll take the time to list out any unread controllers. So I'll go over those. Of course, at top, we're going to list all the controllers that do have diagnostic trouble codes. You'll see that, the module in bold underneath will list that fault code, brief description of that fault code. Over on the right, we'll have our check boxes over here to break down current, pending, and history based on how long that fault code has been stored in the system. We'll scroll a little bit further down. Then we're going to go ahead and list all the controllers that did not have diagnostic trouble codes. And this is just confirmation that they are communicating and they're clear of any faults. So you'll want to scan over that too. In the very bottom, we have our unread controllers. And the reason we'll take the time to put this in the report is actually in the description right underneath it. This is telling me vehicles not listed with, or is not equipped with a controller, or possible connection issue controllers damaged. And this is where the software doesn't really know. All it knows is it knocked on the door, no one answered. Does that mean that vehicle did not have that module? Or was that module knocked out and was it damaged in the collision? So by listing them out on here, you can kind of scroll over that list, check for any options that vehicle may or may not have, and make sure it coincides with the list you see here. And that could be your red flag, especially during a pre-scan. You can make that much more accurate of a blueprint, knowing that, yep, one of these modules is not communicating. I know this vehicle has this option. So now I can allot some more time and or money to diagnose or replace that module while I'm doing my repairs. So it's only one, that's why we will list that down there. And then from here, we can, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, buddy. I was going to ask you why you were here and we're talking pre-scan again. Another question that popped up on the forum, right?
Sure.
And it really does, I think it's more about diagnostics than pre-scan, but I'll let you answer it, right? The question is, if an airbag was manipulated with resistance, can we figure that out through the pre-scan? I think the answer to that is obvious. If there's a DTC set, then you'd know you'd have an issue, right? But if you were trying to go further than that, you would have to run a special test to troubleshoot that specific module. But
yes, exactly, right? So our software is going to read fault codes that were generated by the manufacturer. So now that fault code might be kind of vague, and that's where we can do a little deeper dive. Whether we go into special tests, maybe we're going to go into data streaming. We can actually read, resistance values of the different sensors and airbags in the system. But yeah, that's where you start using the tool, the other options on the tool to do a little deeper dive in there. Now, another option too, in fact, why we're here is this is some new software we're going to be releasing. This is a pre-production example of it. But say I want to do a little bit more research on these fault codes. Maybe this description's kind of vague, right? And sometimes they really are, or it can mean multiple, things. So why I'm in my scan report here, kind of like what we did when we were in the tool, is I want to look up some repair procedures on these fault codes. So we built our software to go ahead and pick any current fault codes that are in there. And then down here at the bottom right, the view repair procedures, we'll be able to tap on that. It may ask me for some options on the vehicle. Let's say it's not a hybrid. And there we go. Yep. And here's my internet having fun here. Let's see if it's going to let me in. You know, it's funny. I was worried about my team viewer. I didn't think my internet connection was going to drop out, so I didn't make any backup slides on this one. And I can go revisit this later too if I can get my thing live again. Yeah, it looks like, there we go. So this pulled those fault codes from that repair order, and now we have some direct links in our Tech Advisor software. So this is our repair information here, and I can look up a little bit more information on this fault code. So it found B2799 in our database, highlighted it right up here at the top, and it just says immobilizer malfunction. That's kind of vague. So if I click on that, this will give us detection conditions that might help lead me in the right direction of, you know, why was that fault code triggered? What is the computer looking for to trigger that fault code? What trouble area that might be in, and any notes that go along with it. And then we can scroll down through here through line diagrams, pinouts, voltage, ohm checks that I can go from here, and I can do a little deeper digging on that fault code from here. So this is relatively new for us. This is supposed to be launched in, I believe, early May is our predicted date for that one. And that's going to automatically happen. So any of our existing customers with the diagnostic tool will have that feature turned on, and we're going to give 30-day trials to anyone that already doesn't subscribe to Tech Advisor, so they can kind of take advantage and see what we have available to them. Does anybody have questions on the scan reports and how they pull them up from here?
Hey, Neil, I know one of the questions we hear a lot from the industry is about being able to generate an invoice from this scan for those shops that that would like to use an invoice versus a scan report for billing.
Sure. And let's see if this one, again, this is a pre-production account I'm in right here, so it's hopefully everything works on it, if not my account. So when I do click on the view invoice down there, it will ask for an invoice number. I can use that, my RO number, however I want to log this. Let's see what we have on the template here. So I did not make a template for this account because this is, again, a pre-production. Let's see if I can log into my account, because this is the one I want to do. Let's see.
That's all right. I mean, at the end of the day, we have the ability, though, to generate that invoice for those shops.
Yeah, I would like to show an example, because I apologize. Let's see if it's going to let me in there. There we go. So there's a good example of one right here. So it will use the shop's billing information already that you have set up with Connect, Cloud Estimating, your Mitchell account. So it'll fill out the header for you. And you'll be able to put images on here too to be able to create your invoice. It'll tell you when an invoice was generated, obviously your invoice number you created. The nice thing is this job information, all this data here, it pulls directly from the scan report. So it'll populate the VIN, year, make, and model, scan designation, odometer if I had it in there, and then RO number. There's just a couple examples that we have on here. So diagnostic scan, diagnostic labor, right? I probably have on here, you know, diagnostic pre-scan, diagnostic post-scan. I may be adding a couple of tenths for bringing the vehicle in and adding, you know, putting a battery maintainer on there. Maybe I perform some calibrations on a vehicle. I'm going to put those in here too. And you have the option to choose a flat rate or your mechanical labor rate, hourly rate. We do have both options available to you right here. And you can adjust that template for whatever you happen to be doing. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, that's Jason. Just pause for a minute if we couldn't talk about this a little bit, because I think that there still seems to be, I think, a lot of misinformation out there perhaps about what exactly is involved in the scanning process. And I think you showed us a lot of those labor operations. It's not just, you know, plugging the tool in, pushing the button. but there's a lot of research that's involved, and you kind of walked us through, your research as far as, possible cause. So what am I looking for? Open, short, miscommunication, whatever. And then we need to even dive even further into it and talk about the actual cause of our DTCs. And so I think it's just important here, you kind of to maybe talk about the scan versus the labor part of it just a little bit more, just to kind of reemphasize that piece, because again, I think that tends to get lost too often.
No, that's actually a really good point, because that question does come up with my customers. And really what it comes down to is when you're doing a pre and post scan and you're getting your typically half-hour mechanical rate, obviously that varies, around territories and insurance providers and stuff, and that might be something you got to negotiate out. That is simply performing that pre-scan or that post-scan, right? Any additional research time should be logged, should be charged, right? So, like you brought up, looking up that fault code, that might be a 2-minute process, but maybe it's a little bit further than that. Maybe I got to walk out to that car. Now I have to start doing, some resistance tests on some seatbelt buckle or wiring loom tests from there. That's all time. That's all billable hours. So absolutely, I would be documenting that time. These aren't published rates, right? And it just varies on what you need to do. And this is something where I recommend shops keep track of that time, make sure they get compensated for that extra effort, right? Because that is not included with it. Any research time should be logged and put on here. And you could absolutely add those lines to this invoice. This is all stuff that you can, manually enter lines into your estimate also. We just provide this if you want to have a separate one for your diagnostics, whether it just makes it easier to get reimbursed for your diagnostic scans. Because I know sometimes it can be, a hassle getting reimbursed. If you'd sublet that scan out, hand an invoice to the provider, they have no problem cutting a check. But as soon as you start doing the work on your own, they just think, oh, well, that's included. So there's just an extra tool that the shops can use to be able to log that information. Or they might just use it for their internal records, right? Maybe they don't provide this with the RO. They simply want to log all their diagnostic work on the side. They want to see how much revenue that diagnostic tool is making for them, and they can keep these for their own records.
Thank you.
So yeah, we make that available to you. It comes with the software. If you want to use it, great. If not, it's up to you. Plenty of shops have no problem getting paid, and they don't need to create an invoice. But Jason, it's a great point. Glad you brought it up. That absolutely, your research time, your diagnostic time needs to be brought in there. And I'll just speak from experience. When I was, I was on the mechanical side for 25 years. We had a set time. We charged an hour diagnostic to hook up a scan tool and run fault codes. We had a certain time limit. When I hit that, we wouldn't spend that whole hour. Look, there was plenty of times where I knew exactly what it was, and that was great. Made some good money on the diagnostic. There's other times I might be spending 2 hours chasing down that one, fault code. If that was the case, we had to charge extra time. We weren't going to include that in the 1 hour. So definitely want to log that information as you go along.
So Neil, just real quick, so on the chat, there was a question that came up in regards to, will insurance companies pay for the time required to do the research? And given that, Mitchell's out there with many carriers, right, do we have guidance to allocate the research time? I replied to that. I hope everybody saw it. But as far as the insurance companies paying, that's going to depend on your relationships and agreements with the insurance company. That's not anything that we would ever want to be involved in. And then on the flip side, to the time studies to do the research, because the DTCs are so varied in the amount of research could happen, I don't see us at any point coming up with times for research as a standard. But you could set that up in the management, or in the estimating system as a template, and then select that and add it to your estimate, depending on what you want to use as an average time. So not sure if you had anything you want to expand on that.
Yep. All right. So kind of speaking of, along those same lines, research time, right? You need to be compensated for it. You need to log it. That a lot of times there's a lot more involved than just simply reading fault codes, clearing fault codes, and moving along. As I mentioned before, you may have replaced a component that's going to require a calibration because it was replaced. Maybe something needs to be calibrated because that's part of the repair procedure, right? Even though there's not a fault code for it, the repair procedures require a calibration to be done with it. And that does vary. Like, for example, say a seat weight sensor on a Honda. In that same service bulletin I showed earlier, besides doing pre and post scan, they also require that every vehicle that's been repaired, no matter how big or small that collision, whether airbags were deployed or not, whether somebody was in the passenger seat, they want you to recalibrate that seat weight sensor, right? Any G-force can affect it. Or other manufacturers might simply say, you only need to perform this action if that component's been replaced or removed, right? So again, there's that where the research comes in. You know, we've been repairing cars for a long time. We kind of rest on, oh, I've done this 100 times. Why would I bother looking at the repair procedure for it? But as you know, we should all know by now, you know, the simple act of replacing the windshield nowadays has become a lot more comprehensive a procedure with all these lane departure systems, rain light sensors for the wipers and the automatic headlights. It's not so simple anymore. And so we don't want to rely on past repairs. We want to look up that repair information and make sure there's not something updated on that. And that's going to take time. We want to be able to log that. We want to be able to document it. So for example, what I'll do is I'm going to jump back in here in my tool and see if it's going to play nicely with me with TeamViewer again. If not, I have some screenshots pulled up. Yep. There's my TeamViewer. Yeah, a little bit of a delay, not too horrible. I'm going to show you some examples, some calibrations. So when I use Auto ID in my tool in demo mode, automatically brings me to a 2008 F-150, which is a bit antiquated nowadays. So I really like to use a little newer vehicle on here, better example of the things you guys are going to run across during the repair process. So let's pick something built in the last couple of years. We'll go with this Acadia. So now we're back in the main menu. Let's say I Auto ID this Acadia, and I want to perform some sort of calibration. Now we have a couple different places to find it in our tool. That's because Bosch actually took the time and gave me a shortcut to some common calibrations, but we have a lot more available than just that. So I do have two different places. Our shortcut would be under our maintenance test here in my center row. And this is going to pop up some common calibrations available to me. So in this one we have 6 different ones. You know, battery charging system, that could be resetting a battery module that needs to know there's a new battery in there, so it can adjust you know, the timeout sessions on it. It can adjust alternator charging amperage based on whether it's a newer or an older battery, or it can be an alternator test itself. Same thing with like brake service. That could be an automated brake bleed, or that could be working with the electronic parking brake system if I need to open and close those calipers, recalibrate after pad change. Steering service. It's actually really nice that we have a steering service as one of our shortcuts, because a lot of vehicles now have multiple steering angle sensor calibrations, right? We might have one in the rack, we might have one in the power steering column, something with the power steering pump. There's multiple systems that use that steering angle sensor and different positions of it. So if I click on the steering service on here, this will look for any applicable calibrations for it in multiple modules. So when I chose it on this one, it actually found 2 different calibrations. It's asking me which one I want to do. And this also lets me, be aware that there are multiple calibrations available for this vehicle. It's not just one. So I can't just stop at that one. I might have to go and do a second step on here. Another one that we have in here, and I'll go show you actually one of our calibrations in a minute. Another one that I really like having a shortcut to is the glass replacement. So this is going to apply to any of the vehicles that have a dynamic calibration for that lane departure system in the camera. Again, most of you may or may not be aware there are multiple calibrations for these assisted driver assist systems. For whether it be lane departure, whether it be blind spot detection, adaptive cruise control. So all the dynamic ones are ones that you can calibrate on a test drive. We make those available in our tool. The static ones, since they require additional equipment, we're not going to have in here. You do need to buy that additional equipment, and that's going to come with the software needed for that. So let's say I did replace the windshield on this Acadia. I will choose it. It'll look through any available test for it. And if this has some sort of rain light sensor test, or simply a camera test, it's going to let me know. So this does have a camera learn on it. So I go ahead and choose that function, and it brings me into my calibration mode. Now typically when we get in here, the first screen usually will be something similar to this when we choose a calibration. So let me know when I need to do it, right? And I probably already know this. This is why I chose that function, but just in case I wasn't sure, So GM, this is the GM specs on this one. So it says the procedure will calibrate the front view camera module, carry out procedure when windshield is removed or replaced, the module has been replaced, or when directed by that service bulletin or a workshop manual, right? And this is where I mentioned you got to look up these repair procedures. Most manufacturers will actually recommend doing this procedure after doing alignment or suspension work. Anything that can change the ride height or how this vehicle drives down the road is going to affect the calibration of this camera. It's not just windshield replacement. There's many other services that will require this. So let's say I did replace the windshield. I want to move along. Simply hit continue and I'll move along. It says, okay, now it's going to start walking me through the setup process on the vehicle, right? So I got to make sure all the tires are inflated at the proper pressure. So whatever the factory specs on the door jamb, I got to set the tires to that. Make sure the vehicle is not loaded. Again, anything that's going to upset how this vehicle drives down the road. So I got a trunk full of phone books, my rear suspension sagging, that means my camera's pointed up in the air. If I calibrate it like that, my calibration's not going to be correct. So make sure you don't have any excess weight in the vehicle, and that vehicle is sitting level when you go to perform this function. Windshield is clean. You know, this is basically, you know, the lens of my camera, so of course that needs to be clean, mainly right around the camera itself, and nothing obstructing the view of the camera, right? Parking passes, decals, the masking tape from replacing the windshield, right? Just make sure none of that is in front of the camera, and lets me know this procedure is going to require the vehicle to be driven. So I'm going to move on from there. Now it's going to kind of let me know what I have to look ahead for. So once I put it into calibration mode, it's going to stay in calibration mode until I'm complete. Even if I shut the vehicle off, pull over, it's going to stay in learn mode. Process shall be completed within 3 to 5 minutes when I meet correct driving conditions, right? So don't go in here thinking, oh, I'm going to be done in 5 minutes. There's going to be a little bit of drive time involved in that. You're going to see that in a second. So, you know, some shops might be able to roll right out their front door and have the perfect driving conditions and be able to perform this function in 5 or 10 minutes flat. Other times they're going to have to drive for a while and find these correct driving conditions before everything's satisfied on it. It also does warn me that I'm going to have a service front camera warning light on the dash. It's actually one of the nice aspects of the tool is, you know, ideally, I'm going to tell you should always have somebody in the passenger seat reading the tool, reading you instructions, paying attention to the status of stuff. It is set up that in theory you can do this as a one-person operation because you can read all these instructions, hit start, set that tool down and just drive because the dashboard is going to let me know if that learning procedure is done and if the system is active. That's all it's letting me know. There's a service light will be on. It's okay. Still haven't started the engine yet. We just have the ignition on. Get ready to go. Then we click continue. And now I'm getting my driving conditions. So now I know what to plan ahead for. What kind of road am I looking for to perform this procedure? Now I have noticed on the different manufacturers, they are very similar to each other. So typically once you find a road that this calibration works on, it should cover just about all the manufacturers that we have in the tool with the dynamic calibration. The main difference I see is going to be the speed. So number one, flat, straight road, right? The flatter, the straighter it is, the quicker, the more accurate that calibration is going to be done. Now GM specifies the vehicle needs to be driven between 35 and 56 miles an hour uninterrupted during that 3 to 5 minutes, right? And just for reference, last time I did a Ford said above 40 miles an hour, right? So they're usually pretty close to each other on speed. So again, once you find that road and those driving conditions, it should apply to most vehicles. But again, read these instructions before you go out there and don't assume it's going to be the same. These may change. During this time, I want to avoid lane changes. That road needs to have visible lane markings on both sides of the lane, right? The camera's optical. That's how it's knowing that that vehicle is drifting out of its lane by reading those painted lines on either side. So that especially applies to calibration. You want to have well-marked lines on both sides of that vehicle so it can perform that calibration process. And then weather conditions are going to affect it, right? Rain, fog, and snow. That's going to affect how far the camera can see. Simply a wet road, even if it's not raining right now. I've driven vehicles with these systems, and not even in calibration mode, but I drive the vehicle, and every time I hit a wet patch of asphalt, the lane departure system shuts off. That glare of the wet road's enough to throw that camera off. So it's definitely going to apply when it comes to calibration. So now I know what my specs are. I got my vehicle prepped, my tires inflated, windshield's clean. I know what my driving conditions are. Now I'm ready to go. So now it says, okay, go ahead and start the engine and prepare to drive. So I simply hit start, right, continue, I start the engine. set that tool down. I'm not looking at it anymore. I'm just driving down the road. And as I drive down that road, the camera is actively trying to calibrate. If I have to drive a few minutes, it's fine. It's going to stay in that mode until all those conditions are met. Once it meets all the conditions, the calibration is complete. That amber indicator on the dashboard is going to shut off. Now the green ready light will turn on. At this point, you can pull over. Now it's going to ask you, does the system actually work? Go take it for a test drive, right? Just like any other repairs we do on a vehicle, you need to make sure that system works, right? Even if it's something as simple as an electric cooling fan in the front, it's even more crucial when it comes to safety systems. Now you got to go make sure this works. Go drift out of your lane. Does the warning light come on? Does it steer you back in your lane? Does it seem like the parameters are correct, right? If everything's working correctly, I simply hit yes and I move along. If it's not working correctly, I'd hit no. It's going to restart the test, put it back into learn mode, and we move on from there. So let's assume this was done. It says, okay, successfully complete. And as we mentioned, paper trail logging all this information. What I always recommend to my customers doing is as soon as you get to this stage where it tells me that whatever that calibration is, right, whether it be a seat weight sensor or steering angle sensor, you have the option, top right hand of the tool, capture, it'll take a screenshot. Document that you've done this, right? There's a couple reasons to do this. We want to get paid for it. So if I need to prove that I've done this and document it, well, I can drop this photo into my estimate like any other photo. And then liability, right? We got to cover our butts nowadays. So if I need to prove 6 months, a year down the line, if the system wasn't working properly, or they claim it wasn't working properly, I'm going to have a couple things going for me. I'm going to have my date and time stamp post scan. That's going to show that when this vehicle left my shop, there was no fault codes. I'm also going to have documentation of any necessary calibrations that were part of the repair procedure. So I always recommend take the screenshot, document it from here. So there's one of our more elaborate calibrations. Now again, I used my shortcut. If I want to do a deeper dive in the car, then I'm going to go into my special tests, and this is going to list all my modules, right? We have way more than just those 6 calibrations and activations available to us. Those are just the 6 common ones. Kind of biased towards the mechanical side, but you can see some of those obviously overlap with collision. So I can get here into my passenger presence module, right? I can go in here and I can, sorry here, my tool is not coinciding with my screen. I can go into that passenger presence module. I can zero out that seat weight sensor. Toyota vehicles, there's actually a second step. You zero it out, and you have a testing procedure where you can actually place weights in the seat, read the live value, what is that seat saying, and they're going to give you a margin of error. If I remember correctly, it's about plus or minus 7 pounds. So there is a Toyota tool, I believe it's 66 pounds. If you place that weight on that passenger seat, you watch the live data. As long as within 7 pounds, plus or minus, then you know that seat accuracy is there and you can move along. I get into my airbag module if I need to configure a new airbag module in here. This is assuming it doesn't need programming. Programming is a whole separate feature. We're downloading software. But if it's simply coding a module or configuring a module, where I'm just simply adapting that module to the vehicle that I'm in, I'll be able to get that from here. And we'll have liftgate modules in here. We can get into my engine module. It's still a fully capable mechanical tool. But I have to get the variable valve timing. I want to turn on electric cooling fans, activate active grill shutters if I want to make sure they work. I can go through my different modules and activate different components and calibrate different sensors from here. So I'll take a minute to pause if there's any questions on this.
So Neil, I got a couple that popped up real quick. I'll give you a break there for a second. One of the questions was, let's assuming for some reason I cannot get the push button, the ignition button to work to get into power on engine off mode, right? So how would you handle that, right? Because I'm pretty sure the ECU is controlled by that switch and it doesn't power up unless you have it. What would you do in that case?
Well, that's where I'm going to jump into Tech Advisor, right? The tool's not going to do me much good because, unless I manually enter it, put it in demo mode, because you're right. That ECU is not live. It's not going to identify the vehicle. That really is the hub of everything, right? And typically that gateway module is only going to be turned on with the ignition on. So I have run across it a couple times. I work with shops where the ignition does not turn on. At that point, that's where you're jumping into your repair subscription, right? Whether it be our Tech Advisor, Mitchell One, all data, you got to start tracing that out. Why is that ignition not turning on? Because that is step one. If that does not turn on, your modules are not going to be awake. You know, you'll be able to talk to a couple of modules, right? Things like body control modules and stuff like that. They are awake at all times, right? Because they control things like lights and door locks. But that's not going to get you where you need to go. So you can always attempt to manually get into a specific module, but the first thing this thing is going to try to talk to is that ECU, right? That's usually the main hub of these systems.
So in short, without key on, engine off, your scan's probably pretty ineffective.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So the second question that came in was, is the tool approved by manufacturers? And I'll take a stab at that. The answer is by some, but not by all, depending on the program that you might be on, right? So if we're talking about repair networks or certifications, you'd have to look at that specific one to find out if the tool is accepted by that. But as far as the manufacturer goes, this particular tool is a Bosch tool, and most of the manufacturers are in here and covered by it. So I don't know if you want to expand on that too, Neil.
Yeah, and to expand, everything we have in the tool is licensed by the OEMs, right? So we do buy the data from them. It's legitimate. They do support the tool. They support, our software on there. But as you mentioned, some OEM networks are going to require only a factory scan tool. This is still technically an aftermarket scan tool. Whether it is licensed by the OEMs or not with our data, it's an OEM tool is a standalone unit. And that's what they require. You're going to have to abide by those mandates. Anything else?
That was it for right now. Thank you.
Okay. And then, we kind of mentioned, we give post-scan, already discussed that, when we should do it, why we should do it. We got to document. Paper trails are very important. When codes don't clear, what we do to research them. Like I can do a deeper dive. I can go on all day here. I can show you how to get into data streaming, right? I want to watch my values in my airbag. It's not just for calibrations and activations. I want to watch my data, and I actually worked with a shop recently that had a fault code for the driver seatbelt buckle. Neil, this fault code won't clear. There's something wrong with the tool. And I'm like, well, let's look into that. What's the fault code? Now it told me that driver seatbelt buckle was out of range. And I said, well, did you replace that? No. All right, well, let's do this. So we went into live data on the tool. I chose the airbag module, pulled up my live data values, and on here, I can actually, now this is all over the place. I'm in demo mode, so it throws my numbers all over the place. Typically, you're going to see a pretty fixed ohm rating on here. But we watched the live data, and we looked at every circuit on that. All the airbags, all the seatbelt buckles, we're all saying 2.5 ohms, except for that driver seatbelt buckle showed 25 ohms. So, well, there you go, right there. There's your red flag. You can watch this live data. Now, the fault code kind of already told you that, but if you wanted confirmation on that, I was able to read that ohm reading. I'm seeing what that ECU is seeing, right? So I'm watching that live data that came in. Whether it's correct or not, that's up to you. You might need to do your own, wire testing on there. But at least you are seeing what that specific module is seeing. That data input comes in from there. And I can record these, as I go. If it's something I need to drive to watch my values, obviously I can't be sitting there staring at the tool as I drive. Maybe that problem happens for a split second. While I'm in live data, I always have the option to, I can record. So I can sit there and drive down the road and record that session. If that problem happens while I'm driving, when I get back to the shop, I can replay it. I can watch all my sensors, right? I could dig a little deeper from here. If I want to watch these in some sort of physical graph from here, I can watch in a bar graph. Sometimes it's a lot easier to watch this in a line graph, right? If I'm watching voltages, I don't want to see numbers jump up and down. If I can watch a line graph, I can see those high and low peaks from here. So I can tune my data based on what I'm doing on it, right? And so this is something, obviously it takes years of experience to really know how to interpret this stuff. We will make it available to you. So you know how to look up this information, what kind of values you're looking for, then you can turn on your live data, watch that voltage, watch those ohms, see what is out of spec from there. So you don't always have to get that multimeter out. We can watch that live data come straight to the tool from here. And this is available in all the same modules that our special tests are available in, right? We'll list all the modules here. And some have useful data, some don't. Just depends on what kind of information. I've used this quite a bit in, like, parking sensor modules. I'm trying to watch that live data. One of my parking sensors is giving me a false reading. I can't tell which one. All I know is I got that annoying chime going off from the back bumper after I replaced it. Well, then I'm going to go into that parking module. I'm going to watch my data stream. I'm going to see all 4 of those sensors. I'm going to see what distance it's reading on each one of those sensors, and I'll be able to pinpoint which sensor is giving me that incorrect reading, either by, there's nothing back there, or maybe I just go stand behind that sensor. Does it read that there's an object right there? And I can test each one of those sensors one by one. Unless we have anything else on there, I'll kind of leave it there. I don't want to take you guys' whole day up. But Willis, I know you want to come up here and you want to talk about.
Neil, I've got a question I'd like you to clarify for everybody, perhaps.
Sure.
What's the difference between a dynamic calibration and then the drive cycle or test drive that you mentioned earlier? They're not the same thing, correct?
Yeah. Yes. So a static calibration, and a lot of shops may have already seen this, or at least maybe seen stuff online. That's where the vehicle is, literally static, right? It's parked. You're in a designated bay. It needs to be a level, flat bay. What surrounds that vehicle is really important because that camera can pick up on objects. So you want to have a designated bay for this without too many objects around the vehicle. Blank walls is going to be important. The lighting needs to be correct. The vehicle will be parked stationary, and you're going to be setting up these jigs or targets around that vehicle. And they may be an optical target, and those targets can look something like a chessboard. It can look like a QR board, and that is going to be placed at very specific distances from the vehicle at very specific heights based on the manufacturer's requirements. Or if it's something like a automatic braking or adaptive cruise control, you're going to have a reflector that you have to mount at specific parts around the vehicle. And that calibration will be done while it's parked in that bay. Again, you have to put it into learn mode, tell it to learn those positions. The dynamic is where that component will be calibrated as you drive down the road, right? So front-facing cameras. I'm sorry?
We're good. I was just
okay. Kids running in the room.
Yep.
So the dynamic is going to be like the one I showed you on that front-facing camera, where you're going to drive the vehicle and it's going to take the surrounding objects, moving objects, and calibrate as you move. We have a very similar one on the same vehicle. There's one for the camera, right? It's optical. And then there's a separate calibration for the long-range radar for the adaptive cruise control, where it has a very similar drive cycle, but it is a little bit different, and it is a separate calibration. And that wants you to drive around vehicles, drive by signposts, guardrails. It wants you actually to be in a little bit of traffic because it's going to calibrate that radar while the vehicle is moving around there. So yeah, so basically one's going to require a test drive, one's going to require the vehicle be parked and the designated targets from the OEMs to
yeah. So Neil, I think just real quick, Jason, your question was, is there a difference between a test drive and a dynamic calibration? Those two things are completely separate operations, right? You are going to have to go do your drive and do your dynamic calibration and then do a test drive to make sure that calibration took and was accepted, right? The same is true of a static calibration. You can do the static, but you're still going to have to go do that test drive. I mean, the test drive should be the last thing you do before you deliver that vehicle, right? Testing out to make sure everything is functioning the way that you thought you programmed it to function and is working properly. You've got to put the car in those situations to ensure that it's ready to be delivered.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess I misheard that. Yeah, definitely. Test drive and dynamic calibration. Yeah, two separate operations. And like I mentioned during that dynamic, it actually has you test drive it afterwards, right? I did my calibration, but that was not my test drive. Now I got to go make sure that system works in whatever system also I worked with afterwards.
And when it comes to that dynamic calibration, would it be a good best practice to have a second technician with you for that process?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I mentioned, technically you can do it as a one-person operation, but as we know, it's so easy to get distracted and look down at that tool, even though, yeah, the dashboard's telling me it's done. I don't want any distraction. Maybe the thing falls off the seat, button gets pushed. So absolutely, I always recommend have a technician or anyway, just a partner in that passenger seat, going through any changes, letting you know what to do if something changes while you're driving. And that way you're not distracted.
And then I would say the same thing for when I'm actually doing my test drive. If I'm testing, whether it's the lane keep assist, whether it's the adaptive cruise control, the cross traffic alert, I think it's always best to have a secondary person that you're working with as kind of that other car, rather than an unsuspecting fellow motorist on the highway, wondering why you keep getting closer and farther away from them as you're testing your adaptive cruise control, or again, your lane keep assist as you're veering back and forth on. I think it's always good to, again, make sure
Yeah.
you've got people around that know what you're working on.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because last time I did one of those dynamic calibrations, we went and played with it afterwards. We let go of the wheel on the fast lane, and we were bouncing between lines, just giggling away. It was working, but you should have seen the cars behind us back and like a half mile off. I'm sure the highway patrol was called, because there's a drunk guy out in front of us, and there's 4 of us all screaming and having a good old time. And maybe not the most responsible thing, but yes, that's a very good point. Have that control vehicle around just so you don't scare anybody.
Perfect. Well, Neil, I know we're getting ready to butt up against the end of our time. If there's any other questions, please feel free to chat them to us or ask them. I wanted to kind of end with this. So, unique times. Obviously, things are going on in the world that we've not dealt with before. And as a company, one of the things we looked at was, there's going to be plenty of dealerships that might not be available to our collision centers to get calibrations done at this point, or clearing codes or scanning or whatever you need done. If you have that capability with whatever tool, right? There's a website right here, right? www.empower.com /find/service, right? Or services, excuse me. You can go in and add your shop to this locator. And then folks that go to this website that may be looking for somebody to provide that service can contact you, and you can provide that service for them if that's something that you would like to do. It's maybe an additional revenue resource for where we are today, and helping out folks that need this stuff done. So I wanted to kind of bring this up so everybody knew this was out there. We launched it several weeks ago, but it's out there for you guys to use. Please use it as you can.
Cool. Anybody else have any other questions for these gentlemen this afternoon? All right. Well, then, appreciate everybody's time again. Our next up, we're back in another hour with plastic repair from the RSG group. So I'm not exactly, I think we may have Doug Craig and some others from RSG coming in to talk about that.
Yeah,
And
the
then
dynamic twins, the dynamic duo, Doug and Dennis are back in an hour.
Doug and Dennis are back in. Awesome. So and then we've got another one at 4 o'clock with working with remote scanning organizations. So certainly hope to see you back for that one as well. But many thanks to Mitchell for your time this afternoon. As always, some fantastic information and much appreciated.
Yeah, guys, I appreciate it. Some exciting offers you got going on. So thanks for sharing those with shops right now. And thanks for
hosting us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, clarify some of this confusion, because I think right now I have too many shops hearing, well, why are you charging? It's just plugging in and pushing a button. I'm like, oh, no.
Right.
If it was just that, I'd hire you. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So we are good to go. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your time. And we'll see you, hopefully, all of you in about an hour. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kristen, Jason.